Right, Rebecca, you're here and I'm here. Neither of us are where we're claiming to be. I'm not there, you're not there. Today we're going to talk about, well, time. Talking about time and how we use it is could be hackneyed. It's been done any number of times, but I'm sure you got some new ideas for us. Tell us what you want to talk about.
I think this has come to me over the last couple of weeks. We have loads of time management and things, and it's around the concept of busyness, and how busy we are. And being busy is often worn as a badge of honor.
Nope.
Oh, I'm really busy at work. And if you're not busy, then it's almost seen as a bit like, oh, well, you can't be doing very well in your business or whatever it is. So we wear that busyness as a badge of honor. But actually, busyness and productiveness are not the same. And I think it's been interesting for me to reflect on that over the last couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I could get all cheesy here and say activity is not necessarily productivity. We've spent a lot of time. We need to go back to it and revisit time to think. And you helped me to recognize that thinking is active time, whereas a lot of organizations see someone thinking and say, why aren't you doing something?
Yeah, and that's it. And you have to have the space, because I think this came to me because I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed with my to-do list, which is never ending. There's always something being added onto the bottom of it as soon as I cross something off the top. And I realized, I thought, gosh, I feel so busy. And it was the pressure of knowing that I had all these things. Now, a lot of that came from me. That was the key thing that I realized, is a lot of that sense of overwhelm became because I was putting my pressure on myself, to do things that weren't necessarily important. And I think that's where I started thinking about, okay, busyness and productivity are definitely not the same thing. And just because I'm doing all these things, is it taking me nearer to where I want to go? And I think that's the line that I sort of went down a little bit on there, and has been sort of pondering on more recently.
And that leads us into self-awareness. And I mean, I know personally that I favor doing things that I like doing over things which are dull and boring but are more necessary.
Yes. And I think this is the thing, we get lulled into a false sense of security. When we're busy doing things, we feel like we're making progress, and that's not actually true, I don't think. We may be fighting fires rather than actually building something in the first place. And I think that's where part of the problem comes. It feels great when I think, oh, I've ticked off loads of things on my list today, but actually, have I achieved anything of great value? Have I achieved anything that's going to take me nearer to where I want to go in my life, in my business, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and in our conversation before this, which wasn't a rehearsal, we picked out that time is the one resource which is precisely limited. You can't get more of it. You can only work what you got. And I don't want to get into cheesy things like work smarter, not harder. It isn't about adding more hours to your day. It's using the day, or the hours of the day you've got better, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think that's the key, isn't it? So identifying what would be at the end of today, what would be a really useful outcome for me? What would make me feel like I've achieved something, rather than just I've gone through the day and ticked off loads of tasks. And that's a subtle difference, what's important for me to get done today, and what will actually take me nearer to that feeling of sense of achievement, rather than just filling it with all sorts of weird and wonderful things.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. We might get some pleasure from doing things, but are those things important? Do those things contribute to something bigger? And are those things at the expense of things that ought to have been done, that you're telling yourself are justified because, well, because what? There isn't a justification sometimes. I know the things that I leave undone at the end of the day that I should have done, if I'm honest with myself, and I'm not prepared to be as often as I'd like to be, in my rare open and honest moments with myself, and say, Andrew, you should have done this. You had the time to do it, but you did those things instead, which you're trying to convince yourself are important, but they just weren't.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having time aside for leisure, because that's also really important. A lot of people say, oh, I ain't got time for exercise, I ain't got time for eating well, I just grab a snack on the go. But again, I think that's really important. as an individual, we are very important in ourselves, and that needs to be part of that time management stuff as well. And, and it's interesting because you'll hear people say, oh, I ain't got time to, have a hobby or whatever. But why haven't you got time? What is it that's more important than looking after yourself?
I'm trying ever so hard not to be anecdotal here. I'm about to be. I remember when I used to work for a living, when I had a real job in the 1980s. I remember encountering a couple of my colleagues in the corridor where they'd clearly been in conversation for some time, and they were talking about not having time for something. When I came back 15 minutes later, they were still in conversation. And it's those sorts of things that make me think people have got time. They just spend it doing something else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where social media can be a real drain of time. I have to be so conscious when I go on to Facebook or LinkedIn. If I go on to do something specific, otherwise half an hour, 45 minutes, I can still be on there
Yeah.
scrolling, not actually of some of it's interesting. I don't know how necessarily useful it is to me personally. Does it make me feel better? Not always makes me feel better either. So that to me is a poor use of my time. That's not been helpful. It's not nourished me in any way. It's not got me any further to where I want to be. So there's always time to do things, but it's what are your priorities? And I think this is where it links to priorities as well.
Well, that implies that we're aware of those priorities. When you talked quite properly, in my view, about this contributing to a goal, I wonder just how clear typically we humans, I can only speak for myself, I've come to realize that I probably spent 40 years thinking people were like me and thought like I did, and that I was somehow like them. I recognize more and more that all I know is myself. So I'm not looking to generalize and say, hey, look, human race, you should think like I do. I'll speak for myself. I'm not always as clear about what I want to achieve in a day, a week, a life, whatever. So it's a hit and hope job. I hope what I'm doing now contributes to something I haven't really focused and clarified, made explicit.
Yeah. And it is challenging. Not everybody, you're right, not everybody knows what they want out of life and what have you. And this is something that I've put out on social media today through scheduling, though. This is where scheduling comes in very handy for tools and things. But asking yourself, a year from today, if you're in exactly the same position, are you okay with that? And some people will be, and some people won't be, but thinking about next year, what would I like to have achieved, or where would I like to be, and then working backwards. So what do I need to do to make that happen? We do have to be conscious about this. We're already in mid-July. We're over halfway through the year, and time flies so quickly. And the older I get, the quicker it goes. So I'm much more aware of the time isn't infinite, really. There's a limit to how much more time I have on this earth, and I don't know how long that's going to be. So now it's making me think, right, will I be happy if I stay where I am, or what do I want else? And it's not just work wise. For me, a lot of it is around well-being and experiencing life and all the pleasures of life as well. That's one of my big things, is everybody should enjoy life and not work to death.
Do you think the difficulty of what you're saying, because I would find it difficult. Again, I'm not speaking for the human race here. Andrew Gibbons would find that difficult. Andrew Gibbons would find it hard to say, where do I want to be in explicit terms next year? I think of all sorts of reasons to say, well, you can't really do that, can you? You don't know it's going to come your way, blah, blah, blah. But you can make an intention. So do you think, I wonder, and this isn't a you should think, it's a do you think, and I'm having a problem clearly articulating this myself, is the difficulty of doing that and the discomfort, which might be different to that, of doing that, something which contributes to these issues?
Yes, I think it is. And you mentioned this before, sometimes we're not honest with ourselves.
I'm not.
No, we get to the end of the day, and I, like you, justify, I think, well, you know what, I've ticked off the whole thing on my to-do list today. That's brilliant. I've actually done something.
I added 2 or 3 things that I also didn't need to do. I've done them as well.
Yeah, exactly. But have I tackled some of the bigger things? Have I looked at some of these bigger issues? And it is really uncomfortable. But I'll tell you what will be more uncomfortable, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, when you are still stuck where you are now and not happy about it and moaning about the same things that you're moaning about today. and that's really uncomfortable because now I've spent 5 more years moaning and complaining about the same things and not done anything about it. Now, this is not easy, and I know it's not comfortable, and I think this is where coaching can be really powerful to help people address some of those discomforts and help them find a way to move forward. You might not be exactly where you want to be, but you're probably nearer to it than where you are now.
Yeah, that's right. This isn't a plug for coaching. We could do that more explicitly if we chose to. I see what you're saying, because relying on your self-perceptions, your self-awareness isn't good enough. Somebody else needs to say, hang on a minute, I'm not hearing a good reason for you not doing what you could have done yesterday. Because coaching isn't all about cozy chats and there and I want you doing well. It's also about saying, hang on a minute, you could be doing a lot more about these things you say are important than you are. Why didn't you do more on it yesterday than you did? That's why I don't do much coaching with people.
It is, yeah. Coaching can be quite uncomfortable, and I think but this is where getting used to that discomfort can be really powerful.
Well, we've talked in the past also about managing interruptions, and part of this for me is, and I think about that every day, and I keep writing little notes, and I do have to do more on this. I think that if you read an article on time management and managing interruptions, I don't see anything there about the interruptions we create for ourselves, and the fact that certainly for me, I'm my biggest interrupter. It's not the phone, it's not other people walking in the office, I haven't got one. It's me thinking, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. What else can I do? Oh, I'll do that I don't need to. Or, hey, that's interesting. I'll do that for 5 minutes, which, as you say, turns into 3 hours. So I think it's also wrapped up with recognizing how we are not a victim of time, that we can genuinely manage it.
Yeah, very much so. And I think, I think this would be a different conversation, but there are ways of dealing with distractions and managing things and what have you. And that's something that I'm learning and practicing a little bit more. I was really proud of myself because I was very disciplined in getting a specific task done and actually focusing on something, and not allowing myself to get distracted and stuff. It might have just been, I can't remember which day it was now, a couple of weeks ago, I did get everything ticked off my list, which I deemed to be important, and they weren't as important as some of the things, and I still didn't tackle some of the bigger things.
All right.
But I was disciplined enough to actually stay focused on what I'd set my intention for the day. Now that's, for me, is progress.
Yeah, and I wonder also, Rebecca, we overload ourselves. Sometimes, I mean, I'm looking at my list here, and on my list are a load of things that have been on every day this week, as usual. And I think sometimes, I know this to be true of me, we're unrealistic with what we can get through. Sometimes there should be half the things there. And would I feel better about doing half the things and getting them done than having a list which is half done that will be carried over to tomorrow? So are we good at recognizing what we can reasonably get through? I'm not sure. I only know I'm not. I can't speak for the rest of people.
No, I think you're right. That is part of the problem, and that's what I'm trying to learn to do, is actually make my list more realistic in the first instance and not do so much. Yep, exactly. Put it in half, because I did a time audit. So this is what else I did a couple of weeks ago. It was in a book, and I've advocated this myself when I've done workshops around sort of time management and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
So I did it for about 3 days. And it was asking you, are you using your time effectively? And I'm thinking, I'm cramming my day full of things. Actually, what I'm realizing is I need to have less things in my day, not trying to cram more in. And that was interesting for me, because I suspect it was a life coaching book and it was one of the exercises. And I suspect what it was trying to do is get people to identify the time wasters. And I can, time waste just as much as anybody else.
We're our own.
Exactly. But I realized that I was trying to cram in too many things in a day, and that's one of my key challenges.
Well, again, I'm trying ever so hard not to leap in with straight out of the textbook time management stuff, but I know I'm better in the mornings and the afternoons. I wonder if enough people, because I just don't know other people out there. Hello, everybody, the other billions of you out there. I don't know you. Maybe you're thinking, oh, crikey, and why do they even bother listening to this? Because this isn't true of me. Maybe it's just us too that have this problem in the whole wide world. I don't believe so. So I know I'm at my best in the morning. I know if I try and do difficult things past a certain time of the day, my head doesn't work as well as it does it earlier in the day. And by earlier in the day, I mean about 7 o'clock. But yeah, so I know the best times of the day, and I use them, I think, better than I used to. Yeah, this is big, isn't it? Because it's the foundation of everything, because if you don't use your time well, you've got no time to do the things that need to be done. What else do you most want to get over in this as ever short piece that you don't want to leave unsaid?
Make time for yourself and don't feel guilty about it. But be present. I think that's the other thing I want to say. Whatever you're doing, be present
What
with
does
the
that
task
mean?
that you're doing.
You know what being present means. I'm not sure I do.
So when the lovely saying, I think it's a Jim Rohn quote or somebody like that. When at work, work. When at play, play. But don't feel guilty spending time with your family, thinking, oh, I really should be checking my emails. And when you're at work, thinking, oh, I really should be spending time with my family and get home from work, because you're not in either place fully. So whatever you're doing, be present is my leaving message, I think.
No, I know you tried to leave then. You might throw a bit more. You might have to leave a second time. Sometimes I think in that we're a mechanism. You wouldn't drive your car all day every day, would you, without giving it a rest? It would overheat and it would seize up. Well, that's what we do. There are some pretty self-evident lessons here. Okay, I'm not going to open up our discussion further because I've invited you close down. You've done that with those important messages that you have. Well, so thanks once again for raising this. And yeah, it's well trodden, this issue, but it needs to be trod again because people just don't seem to be doing the right thing.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.